Prabhupada. Translation: the living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. Please repeat. The living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A teacher in school once threatened his pupil that he would cut off the pupil's head and hang it on the wall so that the child could see how his head had been cut off. The child became frightened and stopped his mischief. Similarly, the miseries of the pure soul and the disruption of his self-identification are managed by the external energy of the Lord, which controls those mischievous living entities who want to go against the will of the Lord. Actually, there is no bondage or misery for the living entity, nor does he ever lose his pure knowledge. In his pure consciousness, when he thinks a little seriously about his position, he can understand that he is eternally subordinate to the mercy of the Supreme, and that his attempt to become one with the Supreme Lord is a false illusion. Life after life, the living entity falsely tries to lord it over material nature and become the lord of the material world, but there is no tangible result. At last, when frustrated, he gives up his material activity and tries to become one with the Lord and speculate with much jugglery of words, but without success. These activities are performed under the dictation of the illusory energy. The experience is compared to the experience of once having his head cut off in a dream. The man whose head has been cut off also sees that his head has been cut off. If a person's head is severed, he loses his power to see. Therefore, if a man sees that his head has been cut off, it means that he thinks like that in hallucination. Similarly, a living entity is eternally subordinate to the Supreme Lord, and he has this knowledge with him, but artificially he thinks that he is God himself, and that although he is God, he has lost his knowledge due to māyā. This conception has no meaning, just as there is no meaning to seeing one's head being cut off. This is the process by which knowledge is covered. And because this artificial rebellious condition of the living entity gives him all troubles, it is to be understood that he should take to his normal life as a devotee of the Lord and be relieved from the misconception of being God. The so-called liberation of thinking oneself God is that last reaction of avidya by which the living entity is entrapped. The conclusion is that a living entity deprived of eternal transcendental service to the Lord becomes illusioned in many ways. Even in his conditioned life, he is eternal servant of the Lord. His servitude under the spell of illusory māyā is also a manifestation of his eternal condition of service. Because he has rebelled against the service of the Lord, he is therefore put in the service of the māyā. He is still serving, but in a perverted manner. When he wants to get out of service under material bondage, he next desires to become one with the Lord. This is another illusion. The best course, therefore, is to surrender unto the Lord and thus get rid of the illusory māyā for good. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Daivi esha gunamayi mama māyā duratyaya māmeva prabadhyante māyām etam tarantite. Dasanasta Bhaktivedanta Parpoto Madhyanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Maitreya Rishi is answering the further inquiries by Vidura, a very highly philosophical, and it will give us an insight into what is this material existence and how the living entity goes through this material existence. This knowledge is important for us to, so to say, to get disgusted with this material experience. It is not easy to get disgusted with this material existence. Not at all easy. It is only by the grace of the Lord one will get little hint that this material existence is very full of suffering, full of miseries, and full of difficulties. Although he is surrounded by all this, still a living entity doesn't recognize these miseries and troubles. Although he is drowning in the ocean of miseries and difficulties, still he feels he is comfortable. Still he feels that he has a chance to enjoy and to become happy and to adjust things. So the living entity continuously tries to adjust the things around him. He tries to manipulate the things around him so that one day he can become happy the way he wants to become happy. This is the situation. It is so difficult to realize that these miseries exist that Krishna mentions in 13th chapter. Dukkha doshanu darshanam. If somebody can take darshan of this dukkha dosha, there is a dosha in this world. What is that? Dukkha dosha. It is full of dukkhalayam. Then that is called, that if we can have darshan of the dukkhas in this world, actually that is considered that he is in knowledge. Krishna clearly mentions in the 13th chapter process of knowledge, and then he explains that one of the items is to recognize that there is dukkha in this world. Maybe once in a while everybody recognizes that yes, there is dukkha, and the whole world will recognize sometimes yes, there is dukkha. Like pandemic time, everybody recognized there is some dukkha here. But then not easy to perceive dukkha on a day-to-day basis. It is not easy. Continuously the living entity is under some kind of an hallucination, and he always sees some prospects of growth and happiness. In innumerable ways, he makes attempts to become happy and prosperous and even permanent. This is the struggle of the living entity. Now here it is mentioned why the living entity is in distress. That is because of self-identity, Atma Viparyaya. Pumsa Atma Viparyaya Pratiyata Upadrastu. So the root cause is why the living entity is in distress, because of Atma Viparyaya. Self-identity crisis is there. There is a crisis with respect to his self-identity. So what is that crisis? Everybody thinks in a different way about his self-identity. Atma Viparyaya. And then because he is thinking like that I am so and so, I am so and so. Self-identity means ego. And if you look at the current world, So many egos we have created. So many egos. Big elections are fought on these self-identities. Enhancing the nationalism. You are an Indian, you are an Ukrainian, you are a Russian. Like that, there are innumerable. So many these self-identities, and they are the source of distress. And how that distress comes? Pratiyata upadarastu. There is a very interesting example is given here. Swashiraschedana, seeing one's own head cut off. This is how a living entity continues his existence in this world. What is that? Swashira chedana, seeing one's own head cut off. Now, can you see your head cut off? Let us say somebody cuts off the head. Can he see that head, how his head is been cut off? As soon as somebody cuts the head, the power to see is gone. You cannot see because with the head, the eyes also will go. Cannot, life will go. So actually it cannot be. We don't see all those things in our day-to-day life. That's why Prabhupada is quoting one example of a teacher threatening the child. I'll cut your head and put on the wall. The child became very upset, it became very worried, got frightened and stopped his mischief. Immediately the child stopped the mischief. So that is, but such experience is possible. Even our day-to-day life, such experience is possible. That is in dreams. In dreams it is possible. Let us say you are sleeping, and then everybody has to go through dreams every day. Sushupta, Jagruti, Swapnavastha. These three stages are compulsory. So in the dreams, if actually he is lying on the bed, his head is nicely on the pillow, he is sleeping, but in the dream he sees that somebody has cut off his head. And immediately he becomes frightened and he wakes up that somebody cut off my head, like that. But actually that is not true. It is possible only in dream. Is it possible to be in this world to see like that? Okay, in the dreams I understand. What about wakeful stage? Can I see like that? It is described when Krishna and Balaram, they enter into Mathura. And Krishna and Balaram, because they are supreme personalities, they can demand anything, they can desire anything, and they can do anything. That they have shown in this Mathura pastimes. We were discussing in the last class also, Jai Radha Govinda Ki Jai. So that Kamsa's washerman, he nicely washed all the Kamsa's clothes and is coming opposite side, and Krishna Balaram sees, Krishna sees, and immediately asks, give me those clothes, I want to wear. And the washerman preaches to Krishna. He says, how can you ask property of the king? But he doesn't know Krishna is the proprietor of the king also. He is the proprietor of those clothes already. So as soon as he is preaching, Krishna immediately cuts off his head. You read this pastime? It looks little jerky for us. How is that Krishna has done like this? He cuts off the head. The news reaches Kamsa, and he understands my death has come. What he wants to avoid all these years, killing so many children, so many people, cruelly behaving with his own sister, with his own father. So he understands, now they have reached. Krishna has come, my death has come into the kingdom. And then he could not get sleep in the night. He is continuously thinking of Krishna. He is continuously thinking. And then he starts perceiving some kind of omens. He starts seeing some things. For example, he goes in front of the mirror and he looks into the mirror, and then his head is not visible. He sees only the below part. Head is missing. So that is an omen which is happening in the what we think as the real world. Kamsa saw such a thing. Actually, there is nothing called real world. What we are thinking this is real, this is also a dream, but an extended dream. Nighttime dream is for few hours, daytime dream is very long. Both are dreamy conditions only. How can you say they are dreams? In the dreams, one important thing that happens is we forget about our identity. When you are dreaming on the bed, let us say you are sitting there and you are dreaming, you are sleeping and you are dreaming, the important thing that happens is you forget that you are so and so. Self-identity crisis. There is a crisis in the dream. You don't realize that I am say a brahmachari, or I am an Indian, or I am so many designations. They are all identities we have created. Those identities are not available in the dream. Some other identity you assume and you experience the dreamy world. So we call an experience as a dream when there is a self-identity crisis is there. You identify with something else. Then that experience is called dreamy experience. Now, the living entity originally is an eternal servant of the Lord. Our identity is Krishna's servant. This is our identity. But in our wakeful stage, we are running around here and there. We are going on with our life, thinking, ordinary people thinking, I am an Indian, I am an American, I am a Chinese, I am a Pakistani. We have created our identity, we are absorbed in that identity. Not ordinary, these identities are very powerful. Absorbed in that identity, and we are leading our lives. Now tell me, is it a dream or not? In the dream, you forgot your original identity and you are experiencing something else. Your head has been cut off and then you are going through some distress. Or some lion or tiger is chasing you and you are in great distress. That's all happening in the dream. Why? Because you forgot your identity. You forgot your identity. So similarly, in this world, somebody goes through the suffering or distress because he forgot his original identity as servant of Krishna. Because you are assuming some other identity, I am so and so, I am so and so. That's why a jiva goes through distress. That's why here it is mentioned in the translation, the living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. The whole distress is because of the self-identity. This is the root cause. Okay, so that means our so-called wakeful stage is also dream. It's a daydream. And so-called the night dream, that is also dream. A living entity simply going through innumerable miseries in a dreamy condition. That's all. Material world, material existence means just going through some superfluous miseries and troubles. They are not real miseries. That's why Prabhupada is explaining in the purport, there is no bondage or misery for the living entity, nor does he ever lose his pure knowledge. Actually speaking, there is no misery, it's all superfluous. For example, in the dream, let us say somebody cut off your head, swachara swashiraschedana. You have seen your head being cut off, and then you wake up and say, he will tell his parents, he will tell everybody, my head has been cut off. And he is telling from his head only. He says, my head has been cut off. So this is a paradoxical life. Life in this material world is paradoxical, illusory, hallucinating. Simply we only created. It is a dreamy life, forgetting our self-identity. So this is so. So Prabhupada is explaining here nicely. He says, he uses the word, this is the process of covering of knowledge. This is the process. Our knowledge becomes covered. For example, Prabhupada is saying that a living entity can never lose its pure knowledge, cannot go through any miseries. But then we see that we are covered. Yes, covering is possible. Knowledge is already there. It is already dormant in the heart. It is with the soul. That is already there, but it is covered. How it is covered? By these so many self-identities. I am like this, I am like that. For example, in the last verse, Maitreya Rishi is saying about one contradiction, paradox. What is that? They say that Supreme Lord is overcome by illusion, māyā, and at the same time they say that he is unconditioned. So if somebody is bound by māyā, how he can be unconditioned? How he can be completely free? It's actually a contradiction, paradoxical. This is how this world is. In this world, a living entity undergoes paradoxical life. Contradicted. Everywhere contradicted. Like for Prabhupada, once he was, in a morning walk with the disciples. And these conversations are very lively and spontaneous. And Prabhupada spontaneously refutes the disciples' arguments. Sometimes disciples pretend to be somebody else. They are pretending some other self-identity. And then Prabhupada, he answers from a Krishna conscious point of view. So once they see a big advertisement about a cigarette, and then that cigarette is titled cool cigarette, and then you smoke this cigarette and you will be cool, something like that. So Prabhupada, see, people are not seeing what is the problem with that statement. Prabhupada says, when you are smoking, you are actually you are touching fire. When you are smoking means you are actually there is fire. but he is saying cool. There is a fire and there is a coolness. Both statements are in one. Now also there is some smoke. So that is the contradiction. That is the contradiction. A living entity is actually suffering, but he considers that as a happiness. For example, a pig is eating stool, a very abominable life, but the pig is thinking, I am very happy. But only a human being can see that this is a very abominable life. Contradiction. Every living entity is simply going through a dreamy experience. We have come to a dream world. This material world is a dream world, that's all. And as long as we continue here, we have to live a contradictory life, an illusory life. So Prabhupada is explaining, yes, there is an illusion, there is an ignorance of the self-identity. Initially that will reflect as a lot of hard work to become something big in life. That avidya, the initial symptoms are that he goes through a rat race, chasing, and his idea is that he wants to become big or great or massive. This is his idea. And then when he repeatedly tries that, and if he is not successful, then he comes to a final stage of avidya, where he thinks that now I have become God. Now I have become God because I have done some meditation, or I understood some jugglery of words, now I have become God. This is the final attempt of the living entity to remove all these contradictions and really feel that he is the supreme, or he is the number one, or he is the, he is very big. To come to that extent, he actually jacks up his mind and goes on putting jugglery of words, go on thinking like that. He speculates in his mind, jacks up, just pumps himself up, that I am this, I am that. And that's how he comes to that last stage of avidya. So that's why Prabhupada is ending his purport by saying, all these things will not work. There is a covering of our pure knowledge day by day. Actually, devotees also, we should be very careful not to be influenced by this avidya. This avidya influence comes to us in the form of lust. The senses will be pulling. So here it is said that Prabhupada is saying, this is the 3rd chapter, last purport. It is a very important purport. Prabhupada is saying here, the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord without considering impersonal voidness as the ultimate end. Because this jacking up should not be there. I cannot commit any mistakes. I am perfect only. The problem is not with me. It's with somebody else, or at the outside world. This is an impersonal process. Avidya. I am beyond mistakes. I am very perfect. This is not good. So that's why one has to consider himself as an eternal servitor. And in the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities of lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Will be influenced by these two. Lust and desire for domination, greed. So, desire for overloading and sense gratification are the greatest enemies of the conditioned soul. You should know these two thinkings are greatest enemies. But Prabhupada is saying, but by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind and the intelligence. One can control. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden. But by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by material senses. If we don't want to be influenced by material senses, continue to practice Krishna consciousness. And then he says, Prabhupada says, and the mind, you can control the mind by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. The intelligence has to be directed towards the pure identity. That means I am an eternal servant of Krishna. This is the secret. If you want to overcome lust on a long-term basis, you have to continuously remind yourself that I am an eternal servant of Prabhupada and I am an eternal servant of Krishna. If this is not there, the mind will go in the same routine of jacking up and say, yes, you are Lord, you are impeccable, you cannot make any mistake, you cannot be conquered, you cannot be dominated by anybody, I am the dominator, this, that. This is how the mind goes on jacking up. If you want to stop that current, your intelligence has to be directed towards your pure identity. This is the identity dynamics. Krishna consciousness. You are beating at the root, I am an eternal servant of Krishna. Then we can cross over the influence of mind and senses. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.